Hey friends, I am so excited for today's guest and I can't wait to tell you a little bit about her. We have Nicole Cleveland on the podcast today. She is a proud Iowa native, award-winning author and seasoned communications professional with more than 25 years of experience in politics, media relations, and grassroots advocacy. Nicole's passion for public service began when she was just 15 years old. By the age of 20, she was managing state legislative campaigns while earning degrees in political science and mass communications. She later made history as the youngest woman ever elected to the Sergeant Bluff City Council, launching a career dedicated to leadership, communication, and community impact. Each week on her podcast, Conservative and Chic, Nicole brings thoughtful conversations, fresh perspectives, and inspirational stories on the topics that matter most, from faith, family, food, and literature to entertainment, lifestyle, current events, politics, and everything in between. I love that so much. I had such a fun conversation with Nicole. We connected on social media, and I just was so in love with the name of her podcast, Conservative and Chic. I suppose it's not just a podcast, it's also a blog and a brand, but I really think you're going to enjoy today's conversation. Nicole has something called Turner syndrome. She was diagnosed with this at, I believe, birth. And she tells us her story in today's episode, just about how God's faithfulness showed up for her even in the midst of that diagnosis. And so even though Nicole is not bringing a post-abortion story to the podcast today, I really think you're going to resonate with a lot of what she has to share about God showing up for us when life is difficult and when our circumstances don't look the way we thought they would. And so I really hope that you'll take a listen and let me know what you think. But without further ado, here is Nicole Cleveland on the Abortion Recovery for Christian Women podcast. If you're tired of living with shame and guilt and want simple steps to heal, find peace, and feel less alone after abortion, you are in the right place. Hey, I'm Brittany, wife, homeschooling mom of two, abortion recovery coach, and pro-life speaker. I learned the secret of how to find healing and redemption from my past. Spoiler alert, it's Jesus. If you're ready for tactical post-abortion healing tips, biblical truth, and strategies for grieving forward, then this podcast is for you. Let's crack open that Bible and get ready to receive the good news. Before we get into the interview today, I have to remind you about our upcoming Abortion Recovery Workshop, which is happening on September 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time. My friend, if you are listening and you have been wanting to heal, but you don't know where to start, you know you're struggling, you know you have triggers, you know that the days are hard and long, and you do not know how you're going to get through them, this workshop is for you. We're going to look at shame. We're going to look at post-abortion stress syndrome. We're going to look at what it means to surrender your pain to God and move forward. And I know, it sounds so easy, right? But I promise you that you will walk away with something from this workshop, and it's completely free for you to attend. In fact, I really like to give away door prizes. So if you register for this workshop, you are entered to win some door prizes that I will be giving away during the workshop. So you can register right now at brittanypoppe.com/workshop. That's BRITTANYPOPPE.com/workshop. Now you can skip registering and stay stuck, or you can register for free and get ready to move forward. I can't wait to see you there. Well, hello everyone. We are back for another episode, and today I have a very special guest, a new friend. Her name is Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited that we connected. And I also will just plug for a second that you have a podcast, and it's called Conservative and Chic. And I'm just obsessed with the name. So very excited to have you on here. But before we get started and kind of dive in, I would love if you would just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Like you said, my name is Nicole. I was born and raised in the Midwest in Iowa, and I was actually diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder called Turner syndrome. and it impacts 1 in every 2,500 females. And so basically at birth, I was told that I likely would never be able to walk normally, that basically the expectation of my life would be very, very limited at best. I wouldn't be able to have a normal life. I wouldn't be able to do sports or be able to go to college or be able to have those experiences. And so my parents were, weren't going to take that for an answer, obviously. And they surrendered themselves to, they always had a strong faith, but they really wanted, they prayed on it and said, I'm not, my child is going to be someone, they're going to overcome the obstacles. And so by the time I was 1, I was up walking without assistance. I did have some major health issues, but every time I had health issues, I overcome it. And I ended up I was told in high school by a teacher that I'd never be able to go to college. And I was an honor roll student. I was in special education, but I was an honor roll student, and she said I'd never be able to go to college. And so I ended up overcoming that and getting enrolled in a liberal arts school called Morningside University. And I graduated high school with the top half of my class, and then went on to Morningside and graduated with 2 degrees in political science and journalism. And after college, I decided to run for public office. I decided to run for city council in my community and became the youngest member of the city council at Sergeant Bluff, and the only female on the council for a long time, and was very grateful for having good mentors and good advisors that helped me through it. But it was a challenge, and I ended up beating 2 incumbents, which was incredible. And I stayed 8 years on the council. And after I left the city council, COVID hit, like shortly after that. And I was like, okay, I'm at home. Well, what am I going to do with, that's meaningful? I don't want to sit and binge watch Netflix, or, um, don't want to, sit in front of the TV, or don't, and I want to read, I want to do, so what can I do that's actually impactful and meaningful? So I started um, kind of going on these, I was on Facebook, but kind of started going on to these prayer groups, but also these groups, support groups for those who had Turner syndrome. And I started looking at how all these young mothers who were having children that were having a daughter that was diagnosed with Turner's, were scared, especially the age of COVID. And they're like, okay, how do I handle this? And what advice can you give? And I noticed myself kind of giving this advice. And I was like, okay, maybe I should do it. So I was like, I want to start a blog. So I started a blog, and then that turned into a book called the Butterfly Chronicles. And then I published a book, and then I thought, oh, what is God calling me to do? And then I realized there's so many voices out there for women, but a lot of the voices that are out there are kind of more on the liberal side, so to speak, but kind of those that they're not talking about faith, they're not talking about um, Christian beliefs, or they're afraid to. And so I thought, I want to do something where I can motivate young Christian conservative women. So I started the Conservative and Chic podcast as a way of kind of bringing this group to know that, we can have people that disagree, we can have a wide variety of conversations, but it's kind of a safe place for conservative young women to go and say, okay, it is cool to have faith. It is cool to have Christian and conservative values. So that's kind of what I started on that.
Yeah, I love that so much because I think that a lot of the options out there are kind of those options that say things like, own your truth, or,
Mhm.
share your truth. But there's not a lot of good conservative, like, options out there for women to listen to that don't tell them lies. And so I love that you created an avenue for that. And thank you so much for sharing a part of your story about how you grew up. And I love that you shared more about Turner syndrome so that we could learn a little bit more about that too.
Hmm.
Um, I'd love to dive into that a little deeper if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
So I would love to know what some of your biggest emotional or spiritual struggles were when you were growing up because of your diagnosis of Turner syndrome.
I think this spiritual was a lot of times I had this, in my mind, like, why me, Lord? Why did you pick me to have these issues? Because I was in and out of the ER probably more. I mean, I was in the ER so much that I knew the nurses by their first name and the doctors by their first name. I mean, it was for a while, it was like once or twice a month to like 3 times a month. It got up to. I had severe ear infections. I had to go to University of Iowa clinic, which is I live in Northwest Iowa, so it's a 6 hour drive one way to go to that. And so it was a lot of like, why can't I just be like a normal kid? Why do I have to go to this, get medical treatment or why? And then I had to start taking shots and medication for it. And I had to take it 6 days a week and I had one day off. And so I took the one day where I had like sleepovers because I so wanted to be like everybody else. But I was shorter because part of having Turner syndrome is not being able to grow normally. And so if I'm 5'1", which is short, but normal short, so to speak, and if I wouldn't have had medication, I probably would have been 3'8", 4 foot and so a lot of times I kept asking God, give me a sign that something's going to get better. Like I'm not gonna have to deal with all this all the time. I mean, especially when you're sick, you're just like you answer that why. And I realized that and I went to the doctors and I would see people who were sicker than me, and I'm like, okay, God has a reason, to me to understand, wanted me to see this person because He wants to understand that even though I'm having this, there's always someone who can use more support. There's always somebody whose situation is different than mine. And so I guess it was after being sick so much, I guess a lot of times I just ended up praying a lot for God to give me a sign. And it was hard. It was frustrating because sometimes, your human side of you, you're like, I want an answer right away. And God doesn't answer sometimes right away, but um eventually, as I got older, He made me feel more comfortable and being able to discuss it. And I really feel like that His mission was for me to share my story. Because when I was about 15, I was a sophomore in high school, and we had this class called parenting class, and we would have the electronic babies that we'd bring home, and then they had a book of genetic disorders. And my teacher pulled me aside one day and she said, one of the subjects in this book is Turner syndrome. Would you feel comfortable sharing your story? And I went home and I prayed about it and I said, okay, give me a sign that this is something I should do. And finally, I did. In front of my class, in front of my friends, in front of classmates that never knew I had this, never knew I grew up with it because I was very close to the vest. Because I didn't want people to look at me differently. I wanted people to be, especially at school, was the one time where I felt like I was a normal kid. Like I didn't have doctor's appointments or shots or have to do miss school. And so I was like, this is the one time where I felt like I could be normal. And so I just kind of kept that side of me closed. And I think God kind of opened that. And so when I turned 15, that was kind of a turning point. And I think in our podcast, we talk about how God had that moment when you were out running, kind of like, okay, this is gave you that sign. And I think that moment was for me, like, okay, this is what God maybe wants me to do is maybe be more vocal about it. And I was like, do I really? And so I gave my speech, and so many people came up to me like, I didn't know what this was. I didn't know about it. And then I started saying, okay, this is what I need to do. And then I think in college, I was more open about it. I talked about it in nursing classes. I talked about it with my friends, my family, more so with my friends for the first time. And I said, okay, if I can help one person to understand what this is and to maybe get resources and treatment for it sooner, then that was my mission. And so then kind of fast forward, COVID hit, and that's when I think God kind of really sent me a message that I need to do that. And so I shared my book, I shared my story, my journey with it, and I don't think I could have done it without God. My mom passed away during COVID. She didn't pass away from COVID, but she passed away due to complications of open heart surgery. And she always was the one per my dad was the same. My dad is the same way, but they both were wanting me to be more open about it, share my story, and they were so supportive of it. And one of the things my mom always wanted me to do was write a book. And I think that when she passed away, God kind of called me into doing that as a love letter to her. And I think she was kind of looking down on me, using God through me and saying, you need to do this. And so I did, and it's so many people in the Turner Center community have really appreciated it, and have some people have even come to me and it's like, I can test my testimony. I know how God is working through me. I have the same thing. I ask God all the time, why did he make my daughter sick? So it's been really kind of an emotional, but very I call it cathartic. It's been very therapeutic for me to do that. And I think that's kind of how that was a defining moment, how God's kind of worked through me too with this disorder as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your mom. How beautiful that you were able to write that book that she had wanted you to write. And I'd love to talk more about that. Again, the name of that book, and I'll make sure the link is in the show notes for listeners so they can go grab it. But it's called The Butterfly Chronicles. And you kind of told us a little bit about this already, kind of what inspired you to write the book. But I'd love to know a little bit more about what message you're hoping readers would walk away with when they pick up your book.
The reason I chose Butterfly Chronicles is because Turner syndrome's patients are called butterflies because no two cases are the same. And I thought it'd be beautiful to translate that to God because no journey to God is the same. Everybody has their own personal journey with God, and their tribulations, what brings them to God, their moment of how they find Christ. Everybody has their own story to tell. Everybody has their own version of, or their own way of bringing themselves to God. And I thought that kind of incorporated both into my testimony, into my book.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I didn't know that. I love the name of your book, but I didn't know that that was the meaning behind it. That is really, really a beautiful meaning.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yes. Yes. So, I'd love to know a little bit more just about your faith and how that's kind of evolved over the years. I know you've touched on that a little bit already, but what has God really taught you about trusting Him even when life hasn't made sense?
I think the one thing God has really instilled in me is patience. And knowing that there is a purpose, there is I can be kind of an impatient person, so to speak. I want to have the answers right away. I want to have a resolution to a problem right away. And with Turner's, that doesn't happen. There's always, going to the doctor, you're going to find something that's a little different than when you were there 3 months before. And so I guess the one thing that he's instilled in me is definitely patience and understanding and knowing that he has a reason for everything. And although it may not seem like it right now, he's going to guide you in the right direction. And I think that's one of the things that's taught me from a very early age that, you know, I that I have to have patience and understanding and sometimes forgiveness too, because not just with other people, but with myself. I have to forgive myself and understanding that I'm not perfect. And that's one of the things I struggle with is sometimes of the things I do with my learning disability and things that I have as a result of Turner's, I get frustrated with myself, and I just have to take a deep breath and let know that he has a purpose. He's the one guiding me, that it will work out. I just have to find a different way to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that so much. And I think a lot of us could relate to that. Although I do think a lot of us could also wish that we had patience. So I love that he's given you patience, because that is a really hard thing to achieve. I think that we live in such a fast-paced society. We just do not do well with that.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I still struggle with, but I am grateful that I guess when you have to have test results, you're waiting for the test results to come in, you want the answer right away. You want to be able to, and Also, I think the one thing he wants me to understand that there is a purpose for myself, in his mission, because I was told at a very early age I wouldn't be able to have children. And so that was one of the infertility is one of the things that is very, very hard for me because I love my niece and nephew with my whole heart. And I'm very grateful that I have them and got to see them grow up and see them become extraordinary adults and see my friends who are raising children. It's amazing to see, but there also are times where that leaves a hole in my heart too. And it's like, okay, I know that you have a reason. I always felt like I think a lot of young girls do. They play with dolls and they play house and they always dream of being a mom and a wife. And I always dream of being a mom. And when I was 10 years old is when I was told that would not happen. And
Mm,
then I was told at like 17 that I could have IVF and that could be, but IVF also is a long, hard, and expensive journey as well. So, I know that there's a reason that God has for me. Maybe my journey to parenthood isn't going to be the same as everybody else's, but that's one of the things that I have to accept too. So I guess another thing that God's taught me is acceptance and realizing that my version of what my life was going to be like may not be what God's vision is for me, but he is guiding me and he is going to define me into what he believes my future should be. And I just have to rest in him and, you know, um, surrender my will to him and that will happen. And eventually, whatever way he plans that for me.
yeah, that's very beautiful, Nicole. And I know that that has to be hard just to be told something like that at such a young age. And like you said, most little girls are playing with dolls. I know my daughter, I watch her. She is turning 7 in a couple of days, and she loves her baby dolls. And so just to hear that devastating news at such a young age, I'm sure really just impacted you. And I love how you have turned to God in that and used that experience to allow God to teach you things and how much you trust Him in that. I think that's really inspiring. And it kind of leads me to my next question because while my listeners have a different struggle. And their struggle is actually due to a choice that they've made in the past. Not a circumstance that was something that they like it wasn't an unavoidable circumstance. And so they're also grieving a life they thought they would have, but it's different because they've had to really just kind of look at this choice that they've made and work through that healing. But I would love to hear, just as someone who has also had to grieve different pieces of a life that you thought you would have, what encouragement would you give to my listener who is struggling to believe that God still has a purpose for their life?
That's the biggest thing for me. It was kind of grieving at different processes because when you're 10, you're not really understanding the concept. All you're thinking is, okay, this one thing is taken away from me. I didn't think about adoption or IVF wasn't really something that was talked about, at 10. And so I didn't really wrap my head around it. So what I did at 10 was like grieving for the 10-year-old way of grieving. I was kind of, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like it was something that, it wasn't like a toy taken away from me, but it was something more impactful than that. It was like, okay, I'm never going to have this. So what am I going to be? I was going to be a mom. That's what I wanted. And so I guess that was the first time I grieved. And I guess my mom kind of had that conversation with me and because my parents are the ones that had to tell me, obviously. And so my mom was very, my mom had a miscarriage. And so she was telling me about the loss that she had. And then she said something very beautiful. She goes, if I didn't lose that child, God had a purpose and gave me you. And he made me, and she goes, God sends his greatest soldiers to be for you. And so at that time I was like, okay, I understand that, you had a loss too. So you're saying that maybe something better is, she kind of like something better is going to happen in the future. And so from 10 to 16, I was like, okay, this is my life. I'm going to find a different way And then when I turned 16, I had a friend that was in college, and her brother had just and his wife had just adopted. And so that was the first time that I heard of that. I understood adoption, but the first time I saw it, the cycles of going through it. And I was like, okay, this is God sending me a message that maybe this is my future, this is my path. And then I went to a doctor and like IVF. And then I ended up kind of grieving that, because then I was told, okay, I have other health issues that may impact that, then maybe not IVF is not a path for me. So then at 16, I went through that issue. And then at 16, I had a friend that had a child. And I was really excited about it for her. But at the same time, I was like, okay, why is that? Can she have one, not me? I mean, obviously I wasn't going to have a child at 16, but at the same time, I was like, okay, now I got to understand that, okay, maybe I'm going to be the aunt, the fun aunt, and so that was kind of a grieving process too, and understanding how God's going to take me to a different direction. And so I guess the overall encouragement is every time that a season happened and I understood it in a different way, I leaned on to God and I prayed. And um, I went through, the struggles. I went through the why me's. I always say that. I always say, why God, why? And every time I did that, God answered me in a different way. And then I ended up becoming an aunt, and that was the biggest joy of my life. They are the two of the most greatest. They're my pride and joys. And I think God sent me to have, God gave me those two in my life for a reason. And I'm so grateful for them. And I have been able to have those. I'm not their mom. They have an amazing mom. My sister-in-law is my best friend. She's awesome. And my brother is obviously the greatest guy in the world. I might be biased, but and those two have shown me kind of what it means to be a parent and what I would want to be if I wasn't a parent. They're great with their kids. My sister-in-law is patient, my brother-in-law is patient, my brother is patient. And so I am very grateful for them, and they have been very supportive, but I got to be the fun aunt. I got to be the one that got to go to their football games and their volleyball games, and got to see the extraordinary things that they've accomplished in their lives, and um, seeing them, eventually become parents, and I am very grateful for that. And I think God kind of gave me that journey in saying that I may not be a mom, but I get to be an aunt and I get to see them grow. And maybe someday, I'm only 41, so maybe I'll be able to adopt. But I just kind of guess to lean that God has a reason and a purpose for all of us, and it may not be what you envision, and you're going to go through the seasons of changes in your life. It's just that you just have to lean on Him would be my best advice, I guess. Kind of a long way of answering that, sorry, but
Yeah, no, I love that so much because I think that there was a lot of really relatable pieces in there. And I just think that it reminds me so much of Romans 8:28. And I know we talked about this when you interviewed me for your show, but for God works all things together for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. And so even though this circumstance isn't ideal and it's taken a lot to process for you and grieve, you also are able to see that God has worked good through it. And you have been able to be probably the best aunt to those two kids. And I just think that it's a beautiful testament to what God can do, even in those painful moments. So thank you for sharing that so much. I would love to just know a little bit more about your podcast, how people can find you, how people can get in touch with you if they hear your story here and they want to know more about who Nicole is.
absolutely. So, as Conservative and Chic on Facebook, on Instagram, it's Chic Girl Podcast. And then I'm a Conservative and Chic on YouTube. You can visit my website, conservativeandchic.com, and you can download my podcast everywhere that podcasts are available. And then
Awesome.
you can send me email through my website, and I reach out to try to respond to everybody that sends me an email.
Awesome. I love that so much. I'll have all of those links in the show notes. So if you're listening to this right now and you want to get in touch with Nicole or listen to her show or even grab her book, you can find all of those links available in the show notes description of this episode. But Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to just share your heart with us. And I just really, really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's going to inspire a lot of people. And I'm just really grateful to have connected with you and would love to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you again for allowing me on your program.
Hey, beautiful friend. I hope that you found comfort from today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave a written review in Apple Podcast or a starred review wherever you're listening? It truly encourages me to know that this podcast is helping you. Also, if you're looking for more support from other women who have walked the same walk as you, please join us in our free Facebook community, Abortion Recovery for Christian Women. Please know that I pray for you daily and I am here for you. I'll meet you back in a few days for another episode, but until then, take care and God bless.